God does not waste any pain. He does not waste any trial. Even if you only did 3% and they did 97, what's your 3%?
Hey, welcome back to the Live Sovereign podcast. We're glad you're here. The topic we're talking about today is conflict and strife, especially talking about when there's conflict and strife with not just random people at the grocery store, but people that you have close relationships with in your church congregation, in your family, in your relationships that you value. How to deal with strife, how to prevent strife and conflict from happening, and what the Bible says about dealing with that in the best possible way.
What you're saying is how to deal with difficult people, even if you might be that difficult
Exactly.
person. No, just kidding.
So let's get right into it. James 4:1. Where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? You lust and do not have, you murder and covet and cannot obtain, you fight and war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask amiss, that you may spend it on your pleasures. And this seems awfully topical and carnal.
Sometimes Christians actually have the biggest, most insidious egos because they think of themselves as righteous and knowledgeable. And as soon as you think, I'm righteous, I'm knowledgeable, and you start putting your faith in that,
apply.
Then you actually have this huge hidden ego. It's self-righteousness that is one of the worst sins, right?
That covers over all of the stuff that we're supposed to be confronting.
As soon as you read the Bible and you start applying it to somebody else, you better watch out because you got a giant telephone pole sticking out of your eye, right? You're trying to get that speck out of somebody else's eye, but the only reason you see the speck in the first place usually is because your view is blocked by the plank.
As soon as you go, well, that I can definitely think of who that applies to, and it's not me. Go, oh wow. There's a big blind spot potentially.
And that's also what James talks about in James 1. He talks about the law is a mirror. And it's easy to gloss over that because we don't apply it to ourselves. But literally he's saying everything you see around you, the people, everything, but especially the people, is a reflection of your inner state. If you see a flaw in someone else, it's a reflection of the flaw in you. It's the mirror that shows you, hey, you got a smudge here. Hey, you got something in your teeth. And the mirror shows you what you need to remove and fix.
Mm-hmm. And even in this verse, it says, you lust and do not have. You murder and covet. It's not talking about other people. Well, they lust and covet and do not have. They do this and that.
Right, because we all do it in our heart to one degree or another. That's what Jesus brings out. He says he's bringing the law to its fullness, its full understanding. He says if you're lusting, it's just as bad as doing it.
Mm-hmm. It says that where strife and war comes from your desires for pleasure that war in your members. And that's literally, like I looked into the Greek words of this, and it literally means just fulfillment and good feelings in your physical body. It's like saying literally in like the carnal human self. So our legitimate desires for things that we want that make us feel good.
So you're trying to get positive energy, but when you don't have a vessel to contain it, it just falls right through. That's what false pleasure is. So here's a concept that's really interesting. Like light from God, like, positivity and love and all the things that he's sending and shining at us all the time. We don't have the vessel to receive it, like a cup that's big enough to hold it all the time. And so we're always needing to grow. How much love can we hold? If your flesh is trying to just grasp for that, like taking drugs, that's a hit of really positive energy, for example. Or sex outside of marriage. That's a hit of really positive energy, but you're getting it in the wrong way. If you don't have, it's like a bottomless cup. If you're trying to catch water, but there's no bottom in the cup, you can't hold it. The light comes in, it goes through, and then you're worse off.
Yeah,
you have a mess.
The idea of trying to fill a hole.
Yeah.
It's like if you're trying to fill a hole with something other than what that hole is meant to be filled with, no amount of filling it with something else is going to work.
So that's what the desires for pleasure is in a worldly sense. There is nothing wrong with pleasure. God created it. However, if you're trying to grasp for pleasure, if you're trying to take pleasure, if you're trying to take something, it'll always fall out the other end and you'll be worse off and you'll have a mess. We can be giving or we can be taking. And sometimes you can be giving, well, but actually taking. You can think you're giving, like giving unwanted advice. Mm-hmm. That's actually taking, because does the other person feel like you're taking their energy? You ever been around those people that you just feel like they're energy vampires? Mm-hmm. It's because they're constantly taking from you. They can be telling you I love you, but it feels like taking.
Right, and it's justified in, oh well, I'm helping someone, but
it's
helping them
it.
Right, and a lot of the time in those situations, helping that person is to make you feel better about yourself,
yes,
rather than to help.
And that's actually
them.
Taking. So over giving is a form of taking. Mm-hmm. We can all feel the negative, toxic energy vampires where like you just don't even want to go near them because you know you're going to feel drained afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The spirit is focused on outgoing concern, love for others, those relationships, and the collective good of everybody benefiting as much as possible.
Right. A win-win-win.
Right. Which is that's operating at a God level.
Yeah. And you don't even have to be a religious or spiritual person to understand that principle. Like that's in like 7 Laws of Success. And like, you know, people that are very wealthy and successful, they know the principle of you need to find a solution that works for everybody. And everybody should mm-hmm. feel like they came out ahead.
Mm-hmm. Better than they were. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the principle of give. And that's why the people that are really successful, even materialistically successful, are successful, because they are constantly looking for ways to give to everybody, mm-hmm. but not in a way that it takes from them. You take from God because he's giving it to you.
Yeah.
And then you give to other people and he gives
Finding
it back.
What's a solution that benefits everyone, because that's going to benefit me more than just finding a solution that exclusively benefits me.
Right. Because that's taking. That's mm-hmm. like the epitome of taking.
Mm-hmm.
That's why some businesses can flourish and others can flounder. If it's all a take, how can I survive? How can I make money? Instead of how can I give value? How can I give service? Then it'll come back to you.
Right. Yeah. The more value and benefit you give other people, the more there is to come back to you. The spirit is interested in what's of benefit to everyone. That's its focus. It's very outward focused. The flesh is just naturally, inherently, just focused on, well, what's good for me? It's spelling this problem out, is that when our fleshly selves that are interested in what we need and what we want, and seeing that that's the most important part of whatever equation is going on, and it goes about pursuing those things, and it spells out exactly, okay, you lust and don't obtain. You murder and covet and cannot get. You fight and war. You're striving with everyone and everything around you.
There's a key concept. Striving is the key word for coming from a place of lack. The ego is always grasping and striving because it's coming from a place of scarcity and lack. It thinks it doesn't have, so it has to take. But when you switch it to the spirit and you live in that, you realize even if you don't see something in your physical reality, you know that you have everything that you need. If you truly believe that you are abundant because you're connected to God and he can give you anything at any moment, and you have abundance and you have fulfillment, you don't need to take because you already have. Coming from a place of abundance instead of a place of lack mm-hmm. is the key difference between the flesh and the spirit.
Right. And if we look at, okay, where do fights and disagreements and strife come from? It's when two people are perceiving that they are themselves lacking something,
and they needed to get it from the other person.
And they need to get it in a given circumstance.
Yeah.
There's one last piece of pie, and let's take it from the point of view of two kids, because kids are carnal and they don't care that they're carnal.
They also are very, very in touch with love and the spirit and life way more than we are. That's why we're supposed to have a childlike spirit.
They
but
are.
They're
unfiltered.
You can see the war a lot easier in kids because they don't mask it.
Exactly. There's a transparency where, okay, if we've got two kids who want the same piece of pie and they are not being supervised in their interaction, they will likely get into an argument striving over, okay, both of them want that piece of pie, and I guess splitting it is off the table. And so it's two people trying to each get what they perceive they need.
And they don't realize that the mom has a whole other pie in the fridge.
It's describing, like, when you come from a place of, I need that, and that means this other person can't have what they think they need.
Do you see though how that actually goes back to the principle I was talking about abundance? If the kids don't know that mom actually has another pie that she just hasn't brought out yet and she's planning on giving it to them, they actually have more than enough pie, but they don't realize it. All they see is the little piece. They're coming from a place of lack, and so they fight over it. When you think you have lack, you fight. When you realize you have abundance, realize God always has an extra pie somewhere on the shelf.
In reality,
then you don't fight, you give.
In reality, you are misperceiving that you have lack, and you're wasting your efforts striving for something that you don't need to strive
You're
for.
gonna get, ooh, great analogy here. It's about a birthday cake. Remember this one? Go over to somebody's house and they're having a birthday party for you.
Oh, yeah.
And they have a cake in the fridge and it's got your name on it, and they're going to, the whole party's for you, and they're going to present that cake to you at the appropriate time. It's got your name on it. It's for you. So if you go over to the fridge and you're like, ooh, that cake, ooh, it's even got my name on it, that looks so good, and you just start like taking handfuls and stuff in your face,
You sneak
then
into the
out,
kitchen before everybody else notices.
before they give it to you, before it's presented to you in the perfect way. If you take it ahead of time, and then people see like, oh, wow, he's got crumbs all over his face.
What a jerk. He went and ate his own birthday cake before we all got to sing and all of that
because
stuff.
if you can wait for God, if you know that you're in a place of abundance because you're connected to an abundant God, and he has a gift that's just for you that he's going to give you at the perfect time, then you can just like be happy knowing that you have this thing that's coming to you at the perfect time, the perfect place. You don't have to go and it ruins the party when you go in and try to take it ahead of time, even if your name is on it, even if it's your party. People are like, man, what's wrong with this guy? Because you're taking versus giving. You can be at your own birthday party, and when you wait and they sing to you and then you get to eat some cake and you're all laughing and sharing stories, it's for you. They're giving to you, but you're actually giving to them.
Everybody benefits in that circumstance. Yeah, let's just talk about some examples. And I'm thinking of this specifically in terms of with our relationships in the church with other people who are converted and following God, because those arguments and that strife can be some of the most hurtful and damaging.
Right, because they're supposed to be the people that are good people that are on your side.
Partly that, and partly because I think largely those are usually the relationships that we hold the most precious and that we have the most value in. And so when someone that you deeply value your relationship with does something hurtful, it hurts a whole lot more than some jerk cutting you off in traffic that you have no expectations of, or you figure, okay, people on the freeway, they're gonna behave that way. I expect that.
When we get in fights with people that we're close to or that are in our church that should be loving people, and we don't realize those people are human, they're going to have carnal moments just like we are. When we get really hurt and we get offended and we don't want to be with that person anymore because we're like, just can't believe they did that to us, it's God's trying to show you, look, you put a trust and a love in that person that you should have been putting in me. People are going to disappoint us. And so we need to be, if we're disappointed in a person and it really gets to us, God's trying to work that out of you because you put too much into that person that you're trying to take without realizing it from that person. I'm trying to take peace and harmony and love from a person instead of taking it from God who's giving it to you and giving it to the person.
Instead of receiving.
If you're disappointed in a relationship, on some level, you were trying to take something from that person and you got disappointed. If instead you learn in future relationships to it's not taking from God, it's receiving. If you learn how to receive that thing from God, it will stop manifesting negatively in your relationship. If you're having strife with a person, you need to realize, okay, there's something that I'm trying to get from this person that I should be receiving from God. So if you notice things going wrong horizontally, you need to check in vertically and see what are you trying to take horizontally that you should be receiving vertically. I
think that is the crux of this whole episode. I think right there is realizing, and this is what the verses here are trying to point out. If you're having strife with someone that you are having a close relationship with, that is the moment to turn inward and go to God and say, what am I trying to get right now that's causing this?
Yeah, because if we believe the principle that other people are a mirror to us, which is what Jesus was saying when he said about the plank and the speck in your perspective eyes, is that the respective eyes? What he's saying, that other people reflect back at you what you don't want to see in yourselves. Ooh, that's a good line.
And I just thought of this other verse. It's, as much as lies within you, be at peace with all men. And it recognizes, okay, there are two parts to any strife, because there are always two parts. You are never 100% at somebody else's mercy when there's strife.
And I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, but I'm going to say it anyways. And it's usually not 3% and 97%, even though it might seem like it. And it's a lot easier, for an example, in an abusive relationship to see the 97% in the abuser and the victim is totally just a victim. But there's something in that relationship on the victim side that is attracting and drawing that out, because somewhere in there, they're trying to get love from the abuser that they should be getting from God. And so they keep on searching until it gets too painful.
Right. And
they have to get it this way.
And it's not conscious. It's not on purpose. It's not finding fault. But acknowledging that and realizing it is so empowering, because for
that
that
power back in
for
you,
that person who is in a victim role, realizing, wait a minute, I don't need to be in an abusive relationship to get this thing I need.
Yes.
You have a completely different source of getting that thing that you need outside of any other person.
Yeah, we need to look inward and look upward to see, what am I trying to get from this that I should be receiving from God? Because once you fill that with his love and his light and what he wants you to receive, you won't have a hole that you're going to need to fill outward, because it's a vacuum. It's always going to, any hole we have inside of us that we're not letting God fill, it's a vacuum of energy that's pulling and drawing other people and circumstances into our life that creates it. That's why we have bad relationships over and over and over again. You can either learn it through pain, and pain works these things out of us eventually. That's what pain is designed to do. It uproots it, and eventually it gets too painful. You can't do it. You're like, I can't do this anymore. And then you change. Or you recognize the signs, go to God, get that hole filled by the only one who can fill it. Everybody has a God-sized hole in their heart that only he can fill, right? We can't fill it with anyone else or money or anything.
Yeah. Money or
but we have to be
acts
aware.
Of service, or
it starts with being aware that I'm in a situation I don't like. You accept the situation, and then you say, what can I do to change this? But you have to accept it first, and in that acceptance, you have to realize what in me is creating this or drawing this, or what am I meant to learn? There's always something. God does not waste any pain. He does not waste any trial.
That's the key.
There's always something.
Is being willing to entertain that, regardless of how much this seems like somebody else's fault, regardless of how much all of this is just like what's going on around me, realizing, okay, there is some part of me somehow,
even if I can't see it, even if it doesn't make any sense.
Right. It's like, I am willing to entertain the possibility that somehow I have something I can do about this.
It's 100. We have to take 100% responsibility. So I got a personal story here. And one of my hardest moments in my life was after I had a complete psychotic breakdown, 2018. One of my best relationships, my best friendships fell apart. And it felt so wrong to me how the other person handled it. My best friend at the time couldn't handle what was going on with me, but she never said anything about it to me. Time went on and I kept being like, okay, she won't return my calls, won't go hang out anymore, and what's going on? Eventually she got baptized without even telling me. And I had no idea this whole time that something that had happened to me through that breakdown, and then all the changes it made in me, which directed me down this path in the first place of understanding a lot of these things and helping people with heal from anxiety and all the different things I've done, started then. But she never told me that all that stuff scared her until a year later. And broke up with me. And I was so hurt, and it felt completely just wrong. I felt wronged. I felt like abused. And I listened to a podcast that was about it was about conscious uncoupling, which is a fancy way of saying like, hey, we're going to separate and divorce, but still co-parent our kids. So it was not about anything that I really agree with all the way or even is relevant to my marriage, but it just, you know how something will just stand out to you, like God was showing me like, hey, look, no, like it jumped off the screen at me, and I'm like, I need to look at this and watch it. And one thing she said in the podcast really stood out to me, and it was, even if you only did 3%, let's assume you did 3% to make this breakup happen, and they did 97%, what's your 3%? And that was a lot easier for me to hear than assuming 100% responsibility, because it's always there. If you look for it somewhere in there, it's always there. Maybe that's too strong, but okay, let's say you did 3%. And so I'm like, okay, what is my 3%? And when I explored it like that, it changed everything, because I saw how I let her kind of walk all over me for years, and how I had wanted something from her that she wasn't able to give me. I was trying to take this relationship to like a higher level than she was able to handle. And nobody on the other side of that wants that. You know, she could feel me pulling and wanting something from her that she couldn't give. And that's tiresome after a while. But I didn't realize I was setting myself up accidentally to be in that victim role, to feel abused, and for her not to tell me. Like, it was partially my fault. Realizing that I had 3%, or maybe more. I'm guessing it was way more than that.
No,
it's a relationship.
Shorthand for whatever amount of responsibility.
Recognizing my 3%, it didn't make me feel worse. It made me feel, it took my power back. I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty major. I'm not going to do that in future relationships. And if I had denied it, I would just create the same old relationship over again, trying to take something from somebody that wasn't willing to give. And after that, because I examined all these things about myself and like looked at the plank in my own eye, like my blind spots, I was able to see that there were other women that almost looked similarly, that I felt this intrigue about, like, oh, I want to get to know this person more. They're really interesting. And I recognized that I was chasing after a best friend, really close relationship with somebody that inherently couldn't give it to me. I only was looking for the people that couldn't give it to me. And I never would have recognized that. And I've been doing that for a long time.
Realizing that you were unconsciously trying to recreate that same relationship of imbalance with someone. I subconsciously was trying to create being rejected, and it blew up into this huge rejection. Anything we're trying to resist and avoid, or that we're afraid of, is going to come and bite us. It's going to happen to us. In Job, it says that the thing I feared most has come upon me. It happens over and over and over again. Anything you are afraid of somehow has to come to you unless you work through the fear, because, like we said before, it will come through pain to refine you, or it will come through enlightenment and God showing you, hey, you need to change this. And sometimes we need the pain to recognize it. Yeah, it's interesting to realize that and apply it to, any of our substantial, deep core relationships, and realize, if you're afraid of something happening in a relationship, if you're afraid of your spouse being unfaithful, if you're afraid of your friends betraying you or talking behind your back, fear
attracts the situation.
If you're afraid of being betrayed by people you go to church with, if you're afraid of your congregation splitting,
that's what you have to go through.
That fear is the indicator that, there's something internally that's almost facilitating or planting the seeds for those types of things to happen, for those results.
Because fear is not of God. Perfect love casts out all fear. If there's something you're afraid of, if you have a fear, it means you do not have God's perfect love in that area of your life, and you need to let the love shine in to that area that you're afraid of and work through that fear, so you don't have to go through the pain of it happening.
And from a personal growth and from a a spiritual growth point of view, fear is like radar or like sonar in a submarine. But it's not showing you, oh, areas you need to avoid. It's showing you, oh, I need to focus on this area to see what's going on there. It's not, oh, I need to avoid getting cheated on. I need to avoid being betrayed. It's, I need to pay closer attention to, why am I afraid of being betrayed, or why am I afraid of this particular thing, and dive into what's in
One way or
there.
another, God will uproot that fear for you.
You
But
might have to deal with that after being betrayed by somebody or after suffering
that's
a
not the
relationship
ideal
ill.
way to deal with it. You should deal with it in prayer alone.
Ideally, deal with it before you create that in a relationship
So,
you have.
Like we said before,
internally.
it all starts with awareness. Okay, so how is somebody going to know? Because nobody wants that big thing that they're afraid of to come on them. Okay, so how do you do this proactively? How do you do it practically? You ask yourself, what am I most afraid of? Fear is going to draw that situation to you in a way you wouldn't expect, because God uses that to work it out of you. There's always something amazing on the other side of working through your fear too, that you're not expecting. That one thing that you really want in your life that you can't ever get is usually on the other side of your greatest fear. It's crazy.
And the contrast, the fear is your I hate to say carnal self, because that sounds really
But
negative.
it is, because that's what your
natural.
flesh feeds on fear.
Right. The fear is your natural self perceiving something bad and trying to
avoid it.
trying to get
Yeah.
the solution to it.
Right.
But God means all things for good, and so the way that your flesh works, having that fear, is the Spirit taps into that as the perfect opportunity to grow into something bigger and better.
Yes, that's why it's two sides of the same coin. Like, God takes what's evil,
Adversity.
flips it on its head, and turns it into good. That's the knowledge of good and evil. But he's up here and he uses all of it for good. So fear is it's like a magnet. It draws the experiences of life to us that we don't want in order to draw them out of us. It's like all the negativity that happens in your life draws that out. So it's like activated charcoal, right? It draws out, you put it on your skin, it draws out the impurities. Or we just learned about this in homeschool the other day, a plant's root system, it literally attracts through positive and negative charges. It attracts the nutrients and things it needs from the soil. And so a carrot plant and a celery plant, they both have roots in the soil, but each plant, based on what kind of plant it is, draws certain things out of the soil that the other one doesn't. One might be drawing iron out and one might be drawing, I don't know, whatever else is in the soil. I'm not a gardener. But what's inside of us is what's going to literally, through positive and negative charges on some level, draw the things from into our lives.
And the natural mechanism of how our natural physical self works, seeing, ooh, I'm afraid of that. I want to fill it with something else.
And the whole process of drawing out the impurities, it's painful and it hurts, but it's a necessary process. Just like gold, when it's refined, it's heated up and the impurities float to the surface. But the heat, that hurts, right? But that's the only way the impurities can come out. So it's like detoxifying your body, right? You do some kind of cleanse and it draws the toxins out and you feel kind of sick for a while. But it's because all the toxins are coming out that were stuck and lodged there, and now they're getting released. We do that constantly, energetically. And so if you're around somebody that brings out your worst, it's not just them. God is using the negativity in them and to draw out the negativity in you, and vice versa. It's not to torture you, and it's not the law of attraction. It's literally how positive and negativity works in this realm of duality and polarity, the knowledge of good and evil. It's like the pendulum, back and forth, right? But all of it's used for good.
A little further down in James 4, it says he gives more grace. Therefore, he says God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And that humility is the solution to strife, to the wars and fights that happen. Having the humility to, instead of trying to get what we need, say, okay, obviously there's something here that I need to address. I need to do that first to be able to deal with what's between me and someone else.
That is the best way to change somebody else, is by changing yourself first. And that sounds like a platitude, but it's not. It's because when you resist another person's negativity, you're actually creating more of it. It's like this.
Mm-hmm. A reaction takes two parts to happen.
And if you get rid of your own reaction, the other person has space to actually change.
And if you've dealt with your own needs and what you're trying to get, gone to God and filled that whatever it is from the right source, all of a sudden, if you don't need something from the other person, there isn't any strife. They might still have a really bad attitude and be trying to get something from you, but without two people engaging, the
war has to end.
Right. That's not strife. That's one person having a problem.
When you change yourself, the other person either has to change too, or they have to fall out of your life, or the relationship has to shift to a lower level.
Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully you benefited and enjoyed this discussion. Remember to like and subscribe.
Yeah, that shows YouTube that this is beneficial content, and it will put it out there for more people. So please go ahead and do that. And if you want to drop a comment below for what you got out of this episode the most, or something that you'd like to hear talked about in the future, please let us know.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
If I literally was sitting here like judging you all the time, we wouldn't have a very good relationship. But if I can see something in you and discern that's a growth area, or even that's a sim, but still accept you as a human and treat you with the love you deserve, that can even help dissolve that problem that you had.